let's say, in my pocket. They own the cars, but the cars are now in use, or sorry, it would be a case where the drivers might own the cars, but you can imagine that somebody owns a pool of things and you're getting the flow off of the pool, and that's good enough. Maybe the idea is that Amazon Web Services owns the data centers, but you're getting the flow of use off of them, and that's really the only thing you needed. Why did you want to actually have a brick and mortar setup in which you actually own servers? And so in part, it's mixing together the idea that the rich are going to screw us. You can be like the rich and own nothing like us, or technological progress, which is we can own flows and not stocks. Or there's the, why can't we be simpler people and just go to Tulum and sing by a campfire and be happy with that? Whatever it is, I don't know these people and I don't want them running my lives. And most definitely, I'm creeped out that they behave like an army of robots.
Yeah.
As if that isn't the creepiest thing in the world, to hear Prince Charles and the New Zealand Prime Minister and our president utter the exact same words.
Yes.
And Angela Merkel, or maybe the Pope. Is Oprah going to say that we have to build back better? It's just like, have you ever heard a normal human being turn to you in an intimate moment and say, Robert, I'm really excited to build back better? Nobody talks like this.
No.
Except robots. Boston Dynamics should have an army of atlases and spots that just bark, build back better.
Oh, it's funny but terrifying at the same time. Okay, so maybe I can put this forward to you. This idea of holding no assets or owning no stocks, just having the rights to the flow through some, abstract machinations that protect you from the prying hands of politicians and or the legal system. Does this, to me, this is symbolic of the demand, which is kind of intuitive, for an untouchable asset. Everyone wants to own something that no one else can do anything about. That's what gold was, right? Just the money with the least counterparty risk. And I think that's what is another way to frame the value prop of Bitcoin, is like, it really is the untouchable asset. When proper precautions, specifically around custody, are taken, it's virtually immune to confiscation. So the increase in government interventionism, the governments, a lot of the major governments are quite insolvent at this point. The IRS, I think Biden just hired 80,000 IRS agents. They're trying to increase revenues. The taking is going to increase. Is this not, how can this not drive people, at least partially, drive of their portfolio's capital allocation into Bitcoin as the ultimate high ground from all of these political,
to an extent? But then, how do you feel about hosted wallets versus wallets that you own yourself?
Multi-sig is the best.
Custodianship and reporting and all that. Don't answer that, by the way. No, I'm trying to be real with you guys, because I worry that you spend so much time educating stupid people.
What the fuck are you doing?
I don't mean dumb people. People who are like me, stupid about Bitcoin. I worry that extrapolated way too much from a few incidents, forking issue and Mt. Gox and all this kind of stuff. Okay, but you haven't seen what's coming. Bitcoin is a real threat, man. You're going to be sitting on top. Real threat. And when the sovereigns fully wake up, it's either going to be too late for them to do anything and they'll get on board, which is your hope. They're going to say, wow, did we let this thing get out of hand? It's like what the recording industry of America did under the MP3 wars. The file sharing networks. Because you started having some kid getting a letter from the RIAA saying, hey, we're going to take your family's assets. Like, what? was trading songs out of my bedroom, and suddenly the recording industry of America is threatening my family. Well, you're going to find out that flesh and blood, you haven't uploaded yourself onto the blockchain. You're not a bunch of silicon. You don't know what's coming.
Remember the RIAA incident that was occurring when I was in college to a lot of my friends that had been downloading or trading music in high school or middle school, and then they're getting these letters, 5 to 10 years later. How did that end up? That was mostly settlement, right? Didn't they basically extorted people for money, as I recall. It was like, send us $5,000 and this goes away.
Well, I mean, it really ended up with Spotify and Apple Music.
Yes, ultimately.
And that ended up capitulating in some sense the artists really sell music effectively anymore. So yes, you can make a small amount of money under some circumstances, but you don't have the same kind of payment structure that you had before. And then you talk to your friends in the music business. There was a period of time where the claim was the only people able to make really high quality records were people with family money. Where, mommy and daddy would hire the studio, the producer, and the musicians, and then hopefully the kid has some talent. And there's some names of famous people who fit that because arrangements, it may be that Apple and Spotify said, hey, we found a great business model. Everybody gets paid. Everybody's happy. Well, musicians who don't tour are not happy. So touring, you can still make some money.
Yes. And this gets into the dematerialization conversation we had in Hollywood as well.
Market failure conversation.
Yeah. So by drawing on that analogy to the nation state response of Bitcoin, do you think it would be something like that, where they just try to charge you an exit tax or some super tax on your Bitcoin holdings or whatever, just to make it quote unquote go away? The other possibility I would think is that, again, if nation states are increasingly desperate for revenue, the window on inflation is being closed out by Bitcoin. Counter argument there, the adversarial thinking of Bitcoin is that a lot of nation states will start opening their doors to Bitcoiners. They want capital to come onshore and invest in all of these things. So it would incite more competition amongst jurisdictions.
To an extent. I mean, I think it's worthwhile looking up into Alpine banking.
No Alpine banking.
Well, Swiss relationships, for example, to money were a fabled culture thing that, in essence, Switzerland could be trusted with money in a way that the rest of the world couldn't be. And, Austria is in the Alps. There are other financial countries in the Alps.
Yeah.
Alpine economics, in essence, came under a lot of pressure because the US wanted to know, well, who's got these accounts and what's in them, and are people using them to evade responsibilities? And you saw some real capitulation. Switzerland isn't the island that you think it is.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what's going to happen, but to not worry about that stuff is asinine. You can't, yes, things that have never happened to you yet happen. Do I believe that violence towards Bitcoiners is the most likely? I don't really know. But I know that this whole fiat planet is got to blow up unless somebody comes up with some new major engines of growth.
Yeah.
If there isn't a replacement for something like Moore's Law, and maybe like 5 replacements for Moore's Law, I don't think this thing is stable. And it's going to lurch around for any way it can to square its circle. It's going to try violence. It's going to try, my personal favorite is I think that 6, 7, and 8 figure families are going to be called the very rich 9, 10, 11, and 12 figure families. And that there's going to be an attempt to get the orthodontists of the world to buy second homes in their 50s to stand in for the multi-billionaire class. And then they're going to find out that there aren't enough families of single-digit and double-digit millionaires after. I think we're going to try to do all sorts of crazy. We're going to try to MMT our way through things. We're going to try to launch phony wars. We're going to try to decide that Bitcoin is useful in terror. That's coming for sure.
For sure.
You know, friend is a Bitcoiner. How do you know he's not planning to attack? I think we're in a terrible situation in which there's no way to keep the plate spinning anymore. And I don't know how long the plates will continue to spin before it becomes obvious.
I think you've hit the nail on the head with when the economic pie stops growing, which has largely been by virtue of digitization, most recently hydrocarbons before that the thing it degenerates into a zero-sum game very quickly. It's scary to think about. Hey everybody, as you've no doubt learned by watching this show, Bitcoin is the single most important asset you can own in the 21st century. And one of the most important companies in Bitcoin today is NYDIG. NYDIG's mission is to get Bitcoin into the hands of as many people as possible. One of the ways they are accomplishing this mission is by empowering banks and financial technology companies to offer their own Bitcoin products and services. As a true game changer in the industry, NYDIG is safely unlocking the power of Bitcoin for forward-thinking individuals and institutions alike. Led by Robbie Gutman, Yin Zhao, and Ross Stevens, NYDIG has absolutely exploded onto the Bitcoin scene recently and has quickly become a leader in this space. So, whether you are a professional investor looking for asset management services or a company looking to white label your own Bitcoin product or service, consider NYDIG your single source solution for everything Bitcoin. It has been said that insanity is defined by doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I would put forth that the printing of money or the manipulation of the money supply, in that definition, a form of insanity we have repeated intergenerationally as humans. And to kind of forget it every few generations, we think that manipulating the money supply will fix economic problems or paper over past bad decisions in one way or another, disregarding the wisdom of our forebears, which has pointed to time and time again that it's not a good idea to distort the ruler, if you will. Where we are today, and you do an excellent job in your podcast hitting on this, like something started to break down. We'll say early 1970s, but could have been in or around there. Which, a lot of Bitcoiners are saying this is decoupling from the gold standard. The sovereign debt bubble that we're in today. I said this earlier, where you could identify people on Wall Street that there's a lot of turnover. So people have not been managing money for a very long time. So there are certain things that haven't necessarily happened to them yet that are actually increasingly likely to happen to them. So I would put forth that we are about to go into the next major bubble to collapse. We've been through .com, we've been through real estate, we've had this COVID liquidity crisis. I think the sovereign debt bubble is the big one that's going to really big one, basically. Property right violations that are going to come in the wake of that. I mean, governments are going to be desperate to just get their hands on any form of wealth that they can. I'm especially concerned for real estate because that's a very unconcealable asset. Is there any way to fix this? This repetitive sanity, as I would call it, where we just think we can keep manipulating the money supply to try and ostensibly correct market failures or manage the market, but it never seems to work out as intended.
Yeah, it seems to me that you'd have to have a culture of people who wanted to go through smaller calamities to avoid larger ones. We've never developed said culture. You'd have to reward people who ushered in problems, like saying, we don't want a conflagration, so we're going to let forest fires happen every other year. Boy, we're not going to get a huge accumulation of fuel. Instead, we say, well, is there no one who will save us from these forest fires? So we save ourselves from the forest fires up until the point that the fuel is built up, and then we have something kind of different. I don't think there's a way of teaching practically minded people the lesson of the turkey. Number go up, for example, is an appeal to historical trend. Most people have the idea that if they've...
Which I forgot to mention is because inside our host collection, I have a material library, like you saw before, of book covers, as well as a material
file, so that means file import, and the format is OPJ, which is here wavefront. Select the file, import it, takes a little bit, and it comes finally up, and we have to get it into an upright position. Of course, it lies at the floor, so it could be that there is no shading on it, so you have to be aware here to switch the button maybe. And then we rotate it in a way that the x-axis is crossing me, and I go upright somehow, and I have to move myself a bit up, down a bit, and more upright. And now I have to check it, what it looks like. Oh, that's not enough, a bit more, I think. That's fine. And so I can leave it this way. So let's look for the Riggify add-on now. So we have to go to Edit Prefs, and there are all the plugins or add-ons. And Riggify is, of course, somewhere at the bottom with the correct. And here you see Riggify, that's it. Go there and switch it on. We can check if there is something. So if we go to the object and with Shift A, there should be armature and armature basic human. That's what we need to do. So we get Galton, I would say, in my words. Now for calibration purpose, it's a good idea to make it transparent here. So I put the rig in front, that's here. So I can always see the bones. And I go to the front and change the size in a way that it fits. So I go to scale and a bit smaller. That's fine. And I can see my scan is slightly to the right, so I have to correct the scan also. So I pick the scan and go to rotate slightly. Tick to the left, and then it's fine. Next is to put the bones into correct position, so I have to go to edit mode, and then in the small toolbar here I go to tools, and then I switch to x-axis mirror because I want to do it symmetrically. What I do on the left will happen on the right and vice versa. So let's see how to move those. I go pretty close now, and with a selection window I pick what I want, and with G, I hit the G button, I position it where I need it, and then release it, click it twice. Now, window again, G button, position it, release it, click it, and so on. So I do it quickly now. If I got everything right in the front view, I switch to the left view, and you can see still we have some work to do. So I change here in the same way. When I'm positioned everything, I check in 3D if I'm correct here. And you can see this one has to be moved. Let's again check it. And now most of it looks fine. Maybe those. And that's good enough, I think. So we're finished now in edit mode. We switch back to object mode. And in object mode, we apply the scale to fix it to the size we have now. For that, hit Control A and scale. And what happens is, show you, everything is set back to 1.0. That's exactly what freeze transformation does, for example, when you use Maya. Alright, and now we go for this little mannequin to look for Generate Rig. Generate Rig is at the bottom here, Riggify buttons. And then if you open that one, then there will be a Generate Rig, which we can hit, and we get our rig immediately. And now we have to connect everything, which is parenting. So what has to be parented with each other? So the thing is, we have to select first the model. That means my scan. And then we select the rig. Shift. So we have both selected, and then we hit Control P for parenting. And then there are different options, and the one we use is with automatic weights. And that takes some time. This is finished now after a few
I'm
minutes.
sick of fucking stupidity. It's fucking everywhere.
I pick the armature and
Ever seen powered flight? Powered flight is impossible, and the Wright brothers are wasting their time. Up until the point the Wright brothers fly, and then they say, well, everybody knew it was going to happen sooner or later. Mostly what people do is they don't want to appear bad in the eyes of those around them. And so the central planners in general put off disasters for somebody else's watch. Like, why have a disaster on my watch when I'm going to retire in 6 years? All I need to do is stop the disaster from happening for 6 years.
Yeah.
So I feel like these are some of the unexplored problems of incentive structures, that when incentives are not aligned and are poor, people behave exactly as you would expect they would. Because you're asking them, do you wish to punish yourself? Like, no, I'd prefer to print money and have somebody else. If we're playing musical chairs, as long as I get a seat, it's you who've got the problem trying to find a way to sit down. And that's what we just had intergenerationally. So, roughly speaking, our generations are following in the wake of people who are very comfortable with printing presses.
No.
Keep in mind that whatever we've been doing, with all of the playing around, for 50 years, gold bugs and the like have been complaining about the 71 decoupling. We've had 50 years of peace. It's been a little scary, the collapse of the Soviet bloc, and we've had a lot of border skirmishes and smaller wars, but what's been going on has been getting crazier and crazier intellectually, but it's still relatively pleasant out there. Yes, you're not making as much money as you wish in your job that goes nowhere, and maybe you can't see your way to retirement, but with the exception of protests in the summer of 2020, look like societal upheaval, the exception of being quarantined and having your life taken away from you. It's still fairly pleasant out there, but this whole thing has stopped cohering intellectually. It's not, our lives don't make any sense.
Right.
And if you think they make sense, I'm more worried about you than if you know that they don't. I think that we are going to print money up until we realize that none of this makes sense.
Agreed.
Recording.
And this, I mean, again,
It's unlearnable.
I think the lesson's unlearnable about printing.
Well, you know, I'm reminded, I think it was Elie Wiesel said that he thought that after the Holocaust during World War II, that there would never be another Holocaust because the lesson was just too, I mean, the Nazis managed to do everything to make absolute evil look visually absolute evil.
Yes.
It's cartoon evil. I mean, it's just cinematic badness.
Yeah.
And that wasn't capable of burning the lesson into people's minds that bad. You remember Samantha Power, who was the UN representative of the United States under Obama? I got to know her for her book on genocide really took off and got the attention of Obama. So she was still relatively unknown. She was depressed. She couldn't get anyone to take genocide seriously. She had this idea. Didn't we all agree we would never have another genocide? And yet she couldn't get anyone to commit to the idea that we had agreed that genocide was a bad thing. We would never let it happen again on our watch.
Genocide!
I think there's something really horrible about the human condition where we can't learn things. Those who can remember the past will not be invited into government so that those who cannot remember the past will be allowed to repeat it.
Wow. Powerful. It is actually. So,
Not bad for an off-the-cuff riff.
oh, no, I thought you were quoting somebody. That was good. So this gets to the Bitcoiner grand vision, I think, is the separation of money and state for, I mean, largely the quote you just put forth. It's like, okay, if only those that are ignoring the past can get into the position of government, then that would be something that's detrimental to our learning collectively over time. So wouldn't it be incumbent upon us to disempower that institution to the greatest degree possible? To your point, your other point, the last 50 years have been peaceful, but I think, again, if I'm leaning on something I got from Taleb, dampening short-run volatility is just going to delay and exacerbate long-run volatility.
The great moderation was a trial run for what we are experimenting.
Yeah, so in the analogy of the forest fires, we have a lot less small forest fires, but we eventually have the big conflagration that burns away the topsoil and prevents anything from being able to grow. So that what's looming over us now is this economic conflagration.
I don't know how to get you guys' attention. It's like I say it all the time. I think it's really important to make this planet as habitable and as pleasant and as safe as we can for as long as we can. If your plan is that humanity is to stay here locked on this surface forever, you're out of your effing mind. Time to go. Because we don't have a car waiting for us to take us off planet, because we have some physics that says it's not going to be that easy, it's all real. Imaginations are so dull that we're not even contemplating saving ourselves. Like Elon is at least 3/4 contemplating save us. He's still thinking about rockets and Mars. My great hope, and I can't pester you guys because you won't hear it, you just hear it as, but put some of the money to a long-range Hail Mary plan for humanity. Because this thing is not, you can say all you want about hard money, fix the money, fix the world, Bitcoin fixes this, Bitcoin fixes everything. I didn't say Bitcoin fixes everything, that's not what I meant. Not going to work. You're going to need institutions. You can fantasize that you've gone post-sovereign. Understand, man, we're just going to have roads on the blockchain. We're going to get married on the blockchain. We're going to have babies on the... Stop. No, we're not. We're going to need institutions. You're going to breathe the air. You're going to be part of physical reality. The nukes haven't gone away. We're probably dealing with our own biowarfare strategy run amok, depriving us of our lives. And my children have lost 10% of their childhood to this nonsense. I don't know how to get anybody's attention. None of you guys really want to do something new, and I'm disappointed, but I'm going to continue to try to get us off planet. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to figure out, is there a physics way of spreading out? Because quite honestly, I don't want to be on the same planet. Anthony Fauci, Nancy Pelosi, Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell, Peter Daszak. Can't be here with these people who make no sense, who are endangering us all, who take no questions from any normal human being. We have no hearings. We have no oversight. We have no understanding of what these people are doing. They're not that great, not the elite. You can call them the elite all you want. It doesn't turn them into the elite. Right. They're sitting in elite chairs in the same way that a baboon sits down in an elite chair. Doesn't mean that, suddenly that baboon is the CEO of Coca-Cola.
Mm-hmm. I hear you loud and clear. I do want to do something about it. I don't know exactly what to do about it. My current view, the entire profession of politics, professional politicians, that entire organizational layer of humanity is premised on violation of property.
I understand that.
The violability of property. So those institutional forms, I agree with you, we're going to have institutions. We have to collectively organize. We have to put ourselves under some ideological canopy and coordinate. But I think if you just have a separation of money and state, or you have inviolable property, which I think Bitcoin represents in many ways, or at least the greatest implementation towards that ideal we've had since the Magna Carta, that changes the nature of all the institutions downstream from the money or the property. Right. So in my mind, the greatest way to make this planet habitable as long as possible is
as long as possible.
Indisputable reality of self-ownership and its extension private property.
Property rights, the genius of the market, hard money, give people an opportunity not to have inflated away that which they've worked and slaved to build up, et cetera, et cetera. Assume that I've got that. Let me make a couple of other suggestions. I am not a physicist.
Dude, I don't want to fucking look at people's nervous fucking breakdowns on social media.
Liberate the physics community, all that sweet FU that you guys are sitting on top of, and give other people the ability to say FU if you're not going to do it properly.
FU.
The right way to say FU is just the way Elon came up with a sort of semi-private space agency. We can get into how the government interacts with that. I don't want to dwell on.